Columbus Day. Joining me now to talk about this is historian Bill Federer, author of Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present, How the Deep State Capitalizes on Crisis to Consolidate Control. The book can be found at AmericanMinute.com. Bill, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you.
All right, let's jump first with, go back a little bit of a history lesson with Christopher Columbus. Why was he sailing to the Far East to begin with?
Well, the Muslims conquered Constantinople in 1453. It was Sultan Mehmed II. And this cut off the land routes to get from Europe over to India and China, like Marco Polo a couple centuries earlier had gone from Venice, Italy to work for Kublai Khan. But when the Muslims conquered Constantinople, the Europeans began to look for a sea route. And so in 1498, Vasco da Gama went from Portugal around South Africa to Goa, India. But in 1492, Columbus had convinced the king and queen of Spain that you could reach India and China by sailing directly west. He runs into some islands, thinks he made it to India, so he names the people he met the Indians. So think of it. We never would have called Native Americans Indians had it not been for Islamic Jihad cutting off the land routes to India and China.
But it was providential because what happened as a result of Christopher Columbus finding these Indians?
Right. Well, a couple things. Number one is the idea that the indigenous people were treated bad. And there were instances, and probably the worst is the Democrat Party's Indian Removal Act. Democrat President Andrew Jackson had signed it, moving all the Indians west, displacing thousands, and of course, the terrible Trail of Tears. So we do apologize for the Democrat Party's Indian Removal Act. But as far as Columbus, he took 4 voyages. The first voyage, all 4 of them, he thought he was this close to Indians. He's wandering around, Cuba with a letter from the King of Spain to the Grand Khan of China. And but his first voyage, he meets friendly Indians called Arawaks. And then he goes back to Spain. He's treated like a hero. But then he's subject to racial discrimination. You think Columbus is? Yeah, he's Genoan. He's not Spanish. And there's a jealous Spanish bishop named Fonseca. And he's like, furious that the king had given Columbus the title of Admiral of the Ocean Seas and governor of all new lands discovered, but he's not Spanish. And so the second voyage, Columbus is saddled with 2,000 get-rich-quick Spaniards and 17 ships. They land in the area of Haiti and have a little settlement called La Isabela that's destroyed in a hurricane. And nobody had seen a storm of this magnitude before. And then they begin to get malaria, and these Spaniards are getting upset at Columbus. And then they run into some islands with human bones cooking in pots and gnawed arms and legs. And these are the Caribe. These are natives from South America that would do island hopping and depopulate entire islands. They would get the local women pregnant and eat the babies. I mean, terrible stuff. And people would say, well, did they really do that? Well, it's interesting. In 2015, they were doing excavations under a building in Mexico City, and they discovered an altar, an amphitheater, and towers of human skulls. Thousands of human skulls. You can Google it. I mean, the BBC did a special on it, right? And they said that many of these skulls were women and children. They were not captives taken in battle. And they said this is their gruesome worship of their Aztec gods. And so it doesn't seem like it was a nice paradise before Columbus came over for the people that were being killed. But so this was the Caribe. No, that was the Aztecs, but the Caribe were ones that were depopulating these islands. And so the Spaniards are not happy with Columbus. He leaves his brother in charge, goes back to Spain, and then he gets ready for his third voyage. This time he gets caught in the doldrums. He's going closer to the equator, and it's an area where there's no wind. He promises if the wind picks up, the first land he sees, he'll name after the Trinity, which he does, Trinidad. Makes it back to Hispaniola only to find it's a mess. The Spaniards ran off and fooling around with the women and making them fill, buckets full of gold earrings. And so Columbus pens a letter to the king complaining, and Fonseca intercepts the letter, tells the king, I told you Columbus is inept. and they send over a replacement governor named Bobadilla, and he puts Columbus in chains, sends him back to Spain, and the king and queen take the chains off. They're not in a hurry to send Columbus on a fourth voyage yet. So Columbus is laid up, and he writes his Libro de las Profecias, Book of the Prophecies, where he talks about that his discoveries help fulfill the prophecies in the Bible that talk about taking the gospel to the ends of the earth. And but the fourth voyage is probably the most interesting. And if we have a minute, I'll share that.
Well, we actually are up against a break. We're going to have to let me see when we can get you back on to finish that story, because the reality is it was Christopher Columbus that opened the door for the gospel and Western civilization to take root in America. And that's why we should all be grateful for Christopher Columbus. And that's why this day has been celebrated for quite some time. Bill Federer, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Look forward to next time.